Hi everybody, I'm James Golding and welcome to Gunroom.tv Food. So today we're going to be cooking a red leg partridge. These are just basic Maris pipers. You can use other potatoes, the red skin ones are pretty good, but don't use bacon potatoes. If you use bacon potatoes, then it tends to make it very, very waxy. And what you want is a light, fluffy mashed potato. But I'll show you how to do that a bit later on. So first of all, we're just peeling the potatoes. You kind of want to get all the eyes out, and that's the beauty really of Maris pipers, is they don't tend to have too many eyes in them. I would say that the one thing about potatoes is don't use the new potatoes either. New potatoes will also be far too waxy and will give your mash sort of funny flavour. So partridge is a fantastic early season bird. The thing about partridge, you tend to get quite a lot of them. When I go out shooting, I quite like to ask the guys if I can have a few more just to put into the freezer. You want to put these into a heavy bottom pan, mainly because obviously we're going to boil them, and potatoes do stick to the bottom of the pan. So make sure that you give them a good old shake before you put them onto the heat. So we're just cutting these into quarters, like so. And adding water just to cover. You don't want this pan full of water. With all root veg, and this is quite a chefy thing, is that with all root veg, it's very important to put cold water on top. A lot of people put boiling water onto their potatoes. Don't do that because it messes up the way that the vegetable cooks. So always put cold water onto your potatoes and a really good handful of salt. I like to use blackthorn salt. This is a fantastic salt. Basically, these guys are based up in Scotland, and they've built this incredible structure which they fill full of blackthorn trees, and they filter the water, the seawater, through these trees, and it creates the most beautiful tasting sea salt. I mean, it's mild. It hasn't got that really intense sodium flavour that you sometimes get with, sea salt. So give it a go. It's really, really good. On the stove, on a nice steady heat, and we're going to get this up to the simmer and cook for about 20 minutes. So this is a red leg partridge, and as you probably know, partridge is the first bird that we can start to shoot in the season, apart from grouse obviously. We actually call these Hampshire grouse down here because they fly low and very, very fast, and you can sort of see actually on this one where you can see the red leg comes out, and this is obviously a French partridge, not the British variety. And there's lots of different ways you can cook a partridge. Sometimes we spatchcock it by cutting out the backbone here and then opening it up, but today we're going to roast it, and I quite like cooking partridge on the bone. When you cook it on the bone, all those flavours tend to stay obviously on the meat, and also it keeps the shape really, really well. And this is something that, when you're putting a lovely dish together, you want to see that lovely shape. Sometimes when you breast out a bird, if you don't get it right, it can mess it up a little bit. We're going to season this with some of our blackthorn salt, both outside and inside. You want to be quite liberal with the salt. Don't forget that when you're cooking it, it does sometimes fall off. So don't be too conservative with it. Good amount of black pepper. And we're going to put some of this thyme inside the bird as well. We crush the garlic clove, and in we go. You can actually do this the night before if you wanted to. Sometimes in the restaurant we like to stuff the birds the night before, and that gives a nice bit of almost like marinading, a dry marinade. Okay, so we need to get this partridge seared off. There's lots of different ways to cook partridge, but it's quite important that you sear it first, and there's two reasons for that. One is so that you get that fantastic golden brown colour on the outside of the bird, but also it gets flavour. Colour is flavour when you're cooking. So if you would just put that partridge straight in the oven, two things would happen. One, it would probably overcook because you haven't got that protection on the outside, but two, you wouldn't have that fantastic roasted partridge flavour. So it's very important to start it off in a pan. I like to use a light veg oil, good squirt of that in there, and we're going to get the pan nice and hot. What we're looking for that noise there. So if you put your partridge in the pan and it doesn't make that noise, your pan's not hot enough. I tend to start the partridge on the side, and there's two reasons for that. One is so that you can test the temperature of the pan, because you can have the pan too hot, which would obviously mean it would burn. But two, it gets a bit of heat into the legs nice and early, and I tend to finish off with the breast. Get a good all-round colour. I've got my oven set to about 180 degrees, and you could have it slightly hotter, but 180 is for us chefs the magic number. Actually 186 is actually my magic number, but it's a temperature that we set when we were in London, and you sort of have that temperature that you work with throughout your career, and that's what I like to set my oven to. When you're searing the bird, always make sure that you prop it up on the side of the pan and get that tricky area around the back of the wishbone, because otherwise if you miss that bit, you take it out, it's almost like it's been in the sun and it's got its white bits. So make sure that you get a good amount of colour. That's probably about as dark as I want to get it. I'm going to add in a crushed garlic clove and a little bit of thyme, and what that will do is it will give off oils when it's cooking, so you get a really good amaret flavour. I'm going to add in a touch more oil, and in it goes for about 12 to 15 minutes. So I think the potatoes are pretty much there. The best way to check is to just get a small knife, obviously press it into the potato, and just want that to slide off gently back into the pan. It's very important with this that the potatoes aren't undercooked, because that's what gives you lumpy pomme mousseline. So we're just going to drain these quickly. While those are draining, we'll take a spoonful of butter, a good spoonful. I've used salted butter here, a good dash of cream. And the reason why I'm adding this in now is because the pan is still hot, so that will gently warm the pan. If you're making quite a lot of it, it might be a good idea to get a small pan and heat the butter up in the cream and then add that in. But for the small amount that we're doing here, you can see already that's starting to melt. So let's just get a good shake into the pan. We're going to get our masher. Now if you have a potato ricer, then obviously use that. For the purposes of everybody at home, this works just as well. So we're going to give it a good old smash. Now it will look a little bit kind of thin in the beginning, but that's good, that's what you want. If you have to add more cream, add it. It's one of those sort of things where, you know, it will thicken up and it will tighten up, either the longer you leave it or the more you heat it up. So we've made this a few minutes ahead of our partridge, so we can just get it right. So just with a spoon, I'm going to mix all that together. Now at this time you can see it's probably about mashed potato consistency. We're going to grab a whisk, and what this will do is this will break down all of those lumps of potato that you didn't get out with the masher. Obviously if you have the ricer, you won't have this problem, because it comes out all like little snakes. It looks fantastic. So once you get to that consistency, you add a little bit more cream and a good pinch of sea salt. To pepper or not to pepper, some people say do not put pepper in your mashed potato, and I remember back in the day people used to put white pepper and it had that horrible sort of flavour. So I don't actually put pepper in my mashed potato, but I do put pepper in my crushed potatoes. So it sort of depends on your own preference really. It depends really how much you love pepper. As you can see, we've added the extra cream, and when you get to sort of that consistency, you want it to be very wet mashed potato essentially, and we're going to add more cream to that just before we plate it, but I'll go through that in a minute. Okay, so the partridge is resting. I'm resting it with the breast side down, and that obviously keeps all the juices in that part of the bird. And while we're doing that, we can add in the butter to our pan, and this is the pan that we roasted the partridge in. It's quite important that the pan is nice and warm. You don't want this butter to start to fry or to brown. It's literally just to lift those beautiful roasting juices out of the pan. We're going to season this again with a tiny little bit of salt, not too much if you're using salted butter like I am. So sprinkle that into there. This thyme, just going to lightly chop a little bit off the top, just those tender top bits of that thyme. Keep that to the side. As you can see, the butter is now pretty much melted. We're adding in our garden peas, and you can use frozen peas if you want. I mean, you can use mange too as well. They're fantastic this time of year. Broad beans, and finish with our thyme. Give them a good old mix around, and we're going to set them to one side and let those guys warm through while we prep partridge. So this has been resting for probably around 4 minutes now, so it's cool enough to handle just about. I say that with my chef fingers. We'll keep this bit of cloth underneath, because when you cut into this, because of all the lovely roasting juices that are still in it, it might go everywhere. So in order to save your shoes, just put a nice paper towel underneath. As you can see, actually, when I've roasted this, I've just made a little incision here, and what that does, it allows the heat to permeate between the leg and the breast. There we go, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a beautiful pink finish. You don't want to see any raw partridge in there, just perfectly pink, and that's what everybody loves, that pink partridge, perfectly cooked. Make sure you use a nice sharp knife. This one's great. So what I'm doing here is I'm following down the breastbone, and what you can actually do is take out the wishbone, but I quite like to use it as a basically a line to follow when you're taking off your breasts. Knife straight down like that. You can go both sides to begin with. It saves messing about when you're trying to do the other side. I'm going to use a flexible knife for this last bit. So we're following down, you find where the wing bone is, and down through there, like so. So, pink, that's how we want it. Put that back in the tray. Again, spin your bird around. Oh, it's nice and hot. And nip it off at the wing. There we go. You can keep that. You can keep the carcasses and make a stock with it. It's fantastic for if you're making a sauce or a game jus or something like that. You could even freeze it and keep it for the autumn season. Whatever you want to do with it. I'm actually going to strip this down and probably make it into a sandwich. Legs are going to go back with the breasts. Have a little tidy up. Remember what I said about the pomme mousseline. It needs to be quite loose. With the excess cream that you've got, just add in a good amount. Basically, it needs to be almost pourable. Taste the seasoning. That's really good. So, set that to one side. So as you can see, that looks amazing when you put it on the plate. And the idea is that we want it to spread out a little bit. Cover about 3/4 of the plate. Got our partridge, so that's going to sit in the centre there, just like so. Put the legs on the top. I sometimes like to basically cross the legs like that so that it sits nicely and doesn't fall apart. We're going to finish this with our peas and broad beans. And they just literally go around. And there you have it, red leg partridge with whipped potatoes and peas and broad bean butter. Delicious.